the three most common questions I get when people ask about all this stuff we do is, where do we find the time? And my response is typically, I get 24 hours a day, don't you? And that's the truth. I mean, we have the same amount of time as everybody, but we've never watched Survivor. We've never watched the Honey Boo Boo. We don't spend our time in front of the TV wasting our time. Whatever day of the week that's playing, we're probably at the VA having dinner with a patient, or we're probably sitting down with someone doing something elsewhere, or at least coming up with an idea and asking people if they would support it. So where do we find the time? It's given to us. It's part of the rotation of the planets. How do we do it and why do we do it are the other two most common questions. I'll do the why first. Usually when people say, why do we do it? I say, well, because it's easy and it's the right thing to do. The truth of the matter is that's the easy answer. The hard answer is because I owe it to the Marine Corps and I owe it to the military, because everything that I've done, everything that I have, everything that is before me is because I feel the need to pay back the military. And I won't get into a lot of details because I want to stay brief and I want to stay short, but I grew up in a very rural, very southern Louisiana where my family was poor. 3 meals a day was not a given. Got my first job at the age of 12, and I've never been unemployed since. Unfortunately, when you go to work at a young age like that, you can put yourself in vulnerable positions, and at the age of 12, I did end up the victim of a very violent crime, and 6 of my classmates were killed. I survived, and that's a whole nother story that this is not the venue for. But needless to say, the next 5 years, I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know how I was going to do it. I felt weak, I felt vulnerable, I felt ashamed, and I made a friend. And I made that friend when I was about to do something stupid and bad, and his name was Gunnery Sergeant Charles Shivers. And I was in a town of Houma, Louisiana. I think I was walking the street looking to break something, and he called me to the side, invited me to lunch, and he spent the next year as my friend, mentoring me. He was a Marine recruiter, and he was a recon Marine, Vietnam veteran, probably a 30-inch waist and a 50-inch chest. I mean, the guy was shaped like a V and had every ribbon you could think of, and I just looked at him and I was like, I want what he's got, and I did. And at the age of 17, I graduated high school, joined the Marine Corps, scored very high in the ASVAB, and he told me I could do everything I want to do. He says, any job you want is available to you. And I said, well, I want to be an infantryman. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, well, on paper, you're very smart, but what you just said is very stupid. And I just told him, I said, but you started in the infantry. You're big, you're strong, you're brave, you're courage. That's what I want. I'm chasing courage, and I'm chasing honor. And he said, okay, then we'll do that. And he put me in, and we lived on the bank of the Mississippi, and we were on the west bank, so they shipped me to San Diego, because if you don't know, they choose where you go by the Mississippi. Marine Corps was great for me, but it's not my defining time. Today's my defining time. My dad, great guy, 8th grade education, not the smartest guy, but certainly the wisest guy. But he told me a couple things, and one thing is that respect is earned and lost on a daily basis. It doesn't matter what you did 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It matters what you do today. It matters what you do tomorrow. And we live by that. And so why I do it? Because had I not met Gunny Shivers, had I not met that Marine recruiter that day, I would not be who I am today. I would not know my wife. I would not know any of you. I would not be living in California. Nothing I am or have or do would be possible if not for that one person. So everything I owe, everything I am, everything I have, everybody who loves me, everybody I love, started with a Marine recruiter. So that's why I do what I do.
I have about 1,600 active duty Marines that are fully integrated into our reserve units. In other words, they hold billets in those units, such as Tom Prentice. He's an active component colonel that is leading a reserve regiment. Hence, it really is that integrated team, not necessarily a reserve special magnet, but really our strength is that integration. And we're the only service that does it, and I think it really is a great model and separates us when it comes to readiness in the sense to have that type of skill sets. And they really carry the hard work behind the scenes that set up the reserve component for success. Just in my own division last year, we had 244 inspections. Okay? Now, we're trying to bring that down. So, Tom's been talking to me. So, Tom, this year I'm going to make it 240. But no, we're working on it in reality. But the bottom line is that is an enormous undertaking for very small staffs that do so much for us, and it should not be left or something that shouldn't be understood. And they just do miraculously. And it really is why we're ready, responsive, and relevant. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the Marine Corps in the sense of the future. General Dunford started as Commandant before he became the chairman. General Neller has taken the baton in a sense and has challenged the Marine Corps to move ahead in the sense of what should we look like in the sense of capability, equipment for 2025. So we've been working very hard to make sure that after a decade of in Iraq and Afghanistan doing certain types of missions, that we're then back to our roots and ready for that amphibious responsibilities that we have. And so is our training meet that requirement? Is our equipment right? We've been putting a lot of time into this. And so as we move forward, what we have found is that we're going to have to do more work in information warfare, cyber, electromagnetic, type of work as what is happening today. The unmanned aircraft systems that are up and running right now, and how do we move forward with that? Both how do we use them, and then how do we counter them as we go forward? It is a major area of interest that we continue to work on. It is a absolute game changer in the sense for our Marine rifle companies to have their own type of drone with a camera to be able to see what's in front of them, if you can see the future and what it means. So we cannot be stuck, as we talk about our successes in the past, it is really a great deal of time and effort being spent on what does our future look like. Do we have enough and the emphasis being is towards that near peer, right? Rather than the who we have been engaged with in our counterinsurgency fight. So getting ready for that kind of near peer conflicts. Do we have enough anti-air? Do we have enough armor type of capabilities? And so these are the type of areas that they're looking at. Is a Marine Rifle Squad big enough? In other words, should it be 14 men with one assistant squad leader that's completely devoted to having that UAS, that drone to be able to control that? So we're looking to the future. A lot of it is going to depend somewhat on what the end strength of the service is. And all the services are looking at that and have put forward different proposals. And what we did as if you ever wonder what generals end up doing in a sense, we did some war games out of our units. We brought them into Quantico. We had 12 generals sit for 10 days, go through it all, and then come up with how we believe the Marine Corps should be structured under 182,000. Then we basically said, build an optimum Marine Corps, and that ended at about 194, and then kind of worked that backwards. And then if the manning gets raised, as you see in the newspaper, the different proposals, then the Commandant has options for what he wants to buy back from the Marine Corps. I had the opportunity to sit on that OPT, and it was quite an education. How do we transition to those host nation forces, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, so they're able to hold their own security, right? And that's really been our challenge. And I say that because during my tour in Afghanistan, when General Dunford asked me to come out, and then followed on by General Campbell, we set up a Directorate of Expeditionary Advising. And what that is and how that has evolved in a sense, both in Afghanistan and into Iraq, is what we're currently doing, which is kind of the next transitional phrase, which is train, advise, assist, and accompany. So what does that mean? What it means is that we have advisors in I'll just start in Afghanistan that are working with those host nation forces. And it limits our footprint. It keeps a smaller group, a more senior group. And what that does is it kind of helps with that host nation feeling in the sense of their confidence. It helps in the sense of less a feeling of abandonment in the sense of their partners. And it allows us to be in position to be able to provide some enablers. And that's where that accompany comes in, to be able to help them and assist them when it's critical for them while they are leading and fighting their war. So what are those type of enablers? Such as for simplicity's sake, we have things obviously that fly in the air that is armed, right? So we can help with that. We can help with some medical in the sense of how they evacuate. This is what our advisors are doing in both theaters. So it is that balancing to be able to use that leverage to help them move forward, to get the confidence to be able to move forward and provide the security that's necessary. But the difference is, if I can just make a quick point, is that of course I immediately defaulted down to the combat side. But what they're actually advising is that link between the ministerial at both in Iraq and Afghanistan down to those corps and those provincial police. And the advisement is really, how do they work their own systems? In other words, how do you connect the strategic level, the national level, to the local level in a sense so they can sustain themselves well after we're gone? And that's where the constant battles are in a sense. And that goes to things that aren't necessarily as exciting, but much more critical, which is how do they recruit? How do they pay? How do they do leave runs? All those things underneath, which what we found is that as we withdrew, if we're not able to keep some sort of team down there to help them, that this is what you saw in the sense when they were asking to enable us to stay in Afghanistan and keep the manning where it was at, because they weren't just ready, they weren't moving forward enough to us to remove those type of advisors. As we go forward here, many times we talk about that strategic corporal and we talk about the tactical issues. I would say to you now, as we move forward, it really is a general's war. And this advising is senior officer business. And I think what you will see now at this point is, and don't be worried about that. You'll see in the paper once in a while about how many generals are in theater. But trust me, in that culture, it's helpful to have a general shoulder to shoulder with an Afghan or Iraqi general. And it makes a difference. So I think what you're going to see is that a lot of our senior leaders, which have always been there longer in a sense, but even staying longer as we move forward here, because of the fact that it is so much about that relationship and that ability to influence them as we go forward.